a platform for these wild apples to be put on display, introduced to a wider community of people, and from there, seeing where things go.
Hey, apples, make them pop, 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 pop. Hey, my name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Hip, hip, hooray! Coming into this episode, you are hearing from Matt Kaminsky, a.k.a. Gnarly Pippin. He was speaking at the Pushkin Cider Pop-UP that took place on November 5th. He was specifically talking about Pomological Exhibitions and Societies, because for the past 4 years, he has been setting up a pomological exhibition around that first weekend of November in my special spot of Ciderville. And he did it this year again. He has a new book coming out. He's going to be talking about all that a little bit later on in this episode. But that gives you just a little tidbit of part of the topic of this conversation, which is why Pomological Societies first started, why they're important, and what he is doing in this context. So do stay tuned for that. I'll talk a little bit more about Matt as we get closer to that featured conversation. If you are checking out Cider Chat for the first time, I'd like to welcome you to this show. We're now in Season 7. This is episode 346. Which means we are 4 episodes away from saying goodbye to Season 7 with episode 350, which I always like to do a recap of the year, kind of take it all in and talk about what I learned and what I'm looking forward to. And I do have a lot to look forward to. 2022 was just incredible, absolutely incredible. If I really start thinking about it, the truth about 2022 is that it had a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And part of the trick is knowing how to maneuver through all that and keep your sight on a goal. And most importantly, to have a goal. Like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And often I find my goals at the bottom of my glass. Having a glass of cider and getting through it and kind of just musing about life with people just helps me figure out a whole lot of stuff. So cheers to that. And cheers to you if this is your first time listening. If you're a regular listener of a Cider Chat, thank you. Thank you, as always. Thank you for being there. Thank you for liking the show, following Cider Chat on the Facebook page, at Cider Chat Ciderville on Instagram, and at Cider Chat on Twitter. All that means quite a bit as we're slowly moving out of Season 7 and into Season 8. So just to give you the long view here, there's still a lot of episodes coming up. I have some episodes I recorded while out in California this fall. We also have the main Apple Camp episodes, so stay tuned for that. That'll be going between probably Season 7 and Season 8, bringing us into the new year of 2023. And there is just a ton going on. So I can't even keep up with it, I'll tell you.
Rhea, shall we cut to CiderCon 2023?
Thanks for the save, Mr. Quince. I think that's a great idea. Or you can talk about the patrons and how they have been supporting Cider Chat. That's also a great idea too, Pear. Yeah, I mean, without the patrons, this podcast would not be where it is today. Folks have been amazing. We just had a new cidery sign up at the Cider Going Up campaign page. That is Bent Ladder Cidery in Ohio, which is cool because Ohio is getting some dues, right? They're showing that they have apples, cider making skills, and bringing it up to a level that we haven't seen there for years. I see here in the notes that we were going to be talking about the commercial makers and folks in the trade who are supporting Cider Chat. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Bring me back to ground zero here. Okay, hand me that list, please.
Here you go.
Thank you, Medlars. Oh, and before I go any further, if you're new to Cider Chat, This is my little team here in the Cider House. We have Mr. Quince.
Roger that.
Mr. Quince, you're supposed to say hello.
Roger that. Hello.
And Perry Pear.
Yes, hello. Of course they know me. I am Perry Pear.
And the Medlars. And they're known as the Talking Palms and help me each week. So let's see. So on this list here, we have some amazing people that I've talked about in the past. And really, it's been a while that I've been talking about patrons. It's kind of crazy. It's just been so freaking busy.
Stick to the list, Rhea.
Oh my goodness, I'm starting to sound like Perry Pear.
Indeed, Rhea, you could only hope to sound like me.
Shall we move on?
Good cue, Mr. Quince. I think I will. So on this list I am reading from, it's all from the Cider Chat Patreon page. And there's a whole bunch of folks who sign up at different levels. You could sign up at the, We Like Cider level. And these folks are at the Cider Going Up campaign page level, which is really mainly designed for commercial cider makers, but anyone can sign up. So allow me to go through these amazing folks who have been supporting Cider Chat over the years and even more recently. We have Esoterra Cider Company based in Dolores, Colorado, which is in the Four Corners region of the U.S. So if you're heading out this winter to that area, doing a little bit of snowboarding or snowbirding, right, getting out of the cold and into the high desert, beautiful region. Check out Esoterra Cider Company. Follow them on all their social media channels. Wonderful people there. We also have Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, which is based in Dunmore, Pennsylvania. That's right near Scranton. Had one of our fellow patrons, Al, visit Dan at Spacetime Mead recently over the Thanksgiving weekend. That was cool to see those photos on Instagram. And they have some cool Instagram graphics going on. Check out their labels and stuff. Very, very neat. Insider Japan is Japan's only bilingual and English cider magazine. It comes out in hard copy and online. Just amazing work that Insider Japan is doing, really bridging the gap between like the ocean to the different land masses and the different cider communities, not only in Japan, but worldwide. So I'm super impressed what they're doing there. Get a subscription today and follow Insider Japan online. We also have Duck Chicken, and they are just an amazing couple. That's both Colleen and James, based in South London. Their cidery is in their South London flat. And they just visited me here in the U.S. Just this past week, had an amazing time with them. And James was talking about how they were siphoning out the cider. The line went, I believe, because they were moving the cider out to get transported out to a canning facility where they had their giggle juice, which is in a can. And I want to tell you, it's a dry, amazing. We drank a lot of cider here while they were hanging out by a fire just a week or so ago. And that giggle juice stood out among the crowd. Absolutely fantastic cider. Whew, really good. Anyways, they were siphoning from the backyard through the bedroom window out to the front tank in the yard. I know that might sound familiar to some of us, but, it's also kind of quirky, and they are just doing some cool stuff. So that's Duck Chicken, really, really neat. We also have Taddy Bogle Cider Works, which is based in Ace out in Pennsylvania. That's in the southwest corner of Pennsylvania. A beautiful cidery. They're kind of building it out. And Kurt Henry there does wonderful stuff with the cider, both cider for everyone and then also some special ciders on the side. So do check out Taddy Bogle Cider Works. A lot of different events there that are happening all the time. Also, Ross Cider and Perry Company, which is based in Ross-on-Wye. This is out in West Country in the UK. Cider making land out there. Spectacular Orchards, a yearly cider fest called the Ross Cider Fest, always takes place right at the end of August and the beginning of September. So it'd be like over our Labor Day weekend here in the U.S., and they also have the Yew Tree Pub right there out front on the main drag. It's open year-round. Stop in, have a pint or two. A cool pub. And the amount of variety that they have at that cidery is out of this world. I mean, the single variety, if you want to get down to single varietal, both apples and pears, Ross Cider Company is where you want to go to. Wonderful family, the Johnsons. I adore them. And we also have Olympic Bluffs Cidery, which is based in Washington State, right on the coast. It's getting some sun kiss. It's getting some saltwater kiss. Those coastal cideries are always super unique. Of course, there's a whole bunch of them out in the Pacific Northwest. And this one is equally unique. Just follow them on Instagram for the photos alone are absolutely breathtaking. That is led by both Ginger and Scott, a lovely couple. I have fallen deeply for them. You know when you meet people and you're just like, oh my God, like total street cred in so many ways. These are the people who have it. You know, I could say that about all the patrons too, but I happen to hang with these two on the French cider tour and really got to know them. And they're the kind of people that you could walk anywhere with. I can't wait to have them on the podcast because I want you to hear more about their story, who they are, and why this is one of those cideries to really watch for. And also the American Cider Association. And boy, the name alone tells you everything. They're the folks helping to promote cider in the US of A and keeping it on the map for the political agenda and also for legislation that really helps cider makers. And coming up this coming year in the tail end of January, you want to be making your way out to Chicago to attend CiderCon. And I think this is actually a great segue to talk a little bit more about what's happening with CiderCon, where we have a little clip here with Michelle McGrath, who is the executive director for the American Cider Association. And she's going to be telling us a little bit about some of the early events happening that are a preamble to the main events that begin on February 1st. So is this a good time to roll to that clip?
I think a very good time indeed, Rhea, but make sure to say one more time how much you appreciate the patrons.
True that, Perry Pear, and I certainly do. And I also want to encourage anyone out there in Ciderville listening now, if you get some value from this podcast and you feel that it serves you well, do consider becoming a patron or just hit the donate button at ciderchat.com.
Roger that.
Okay, then. Well, let's head to this clip here with Michelle McGrath. You'll be hearing what I'm asking about is the early tours, what takes place on Tuesday, which this year is going to be January 30th, 2023 in Chicago. Some really cool stuff happening there. Let's roll. Are there like preambles, like on Tuesday? Is there going to be any kind of workshops or is that going to all be tours?
On Tuesday, it's all tours. We have a Frank Lloyd Wright tour that has lunch at Eris Cidery. We have the Bronzeville neighborhood tour. That tour doesn't have any cider in it, which makes it more affordable. So if tours are often too expensive for you, check out the Bronzeville neighborhood. We were inspired by last year's success of the Jackson Ward tour that we did in Richmond, Virginia. One of our goals this year is really to celebrate Chicago. It's an amazing city. We're really excited about that Bronzeville tour. A lot of the other tours are selling out, but there's another one with Liz Garibray of the Chicago Brew Museum that's going to be a historical tavern tour, and that's an evening tour. So if somebody, for the first year this time, if somebody wanted to do two tours, they could. They could do Bronzeville in the morning, then have lunch, and then go to the evening tour of the historical tours with Liz Garibray. And for those that don't know Liz, she's just an amazing tour guide and knows a ton about the history of Chicago and alcohol in Chicago. So that should be a really exciting tour. And then Wednesday, we have a ton of events. We call those kind of our masterclass boot camp events where they're longer. Unlike Thursday, where you're trying to get to as many events as possible on Thursday and Friday. On Wednesday, it's an opportunity to really dive deep on a specific topic. So we have the TTB coming and doing their boot camp, and people who come to CiderCon every year still go to the TTB boot camp because the regulations change and their guidelines change, and so it's an opportunity to kind of figure out how you can be compliant. And I've asked them to include a session on labeling with spirits because the rules there have recently changed. So for those of you that are making cider with spirits, this is a good opportunity to catch up on compliance, so that maybe you don't have to have 5 revisions of your labels before you finally get them accepted.
Okay, boy, I'm very curious about that one. That sounds like a hot topic. Excellent. Wow.
And there's also a tap room class with our friends at Brewery Finance. So it's a really good year to send your tasting room manager. That event is going to dive deep on, how to have a really successful tasting room. They do a great job. So lots of cool events.
Fantastic. And I imagine that folks can get their hotel reservations now, and a great way to support the American Cider Association is by staying at the hotel, which makes a lot of sense in Chicago because it's always really cold, and you don't want to be like having to go across town, missing a workshop that you came all the way from, I don't know, wherever in like the U.S. or even further to attend. So this is a great time to really support the ACA by going and staying at the Hilton. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Rhea, for that plug. One of the reasons we go back to Chicago every year is because we have heard from our members that affordability is really important. And the hotel room at the Chicago Hilton is only $130 a night because of our block, which is amazing. It's, $50 more in other locations, and that adds up. I have also had great success finding affordable air flights to Chicago. It's been way less expensive than I anticipated. So I'm really thrilled that this is going to be an affordable opportunity for our members to come back to CiderCon, the event that they know and love.
I would say that you can't afford not to go, because we wouldn't want to miss the biggest trade conference for the American cider makers specifically, and certainly all the friends who that attend too. So I know I'm going to be there, and I really appreciate your time here today, Michelle, for catching us up. We'll be talking more about CiderCon and all the events coming on board in the coming weeks as we all get ready and start packing our bags for Chicago. If you've been getting encouraged to think about making cider after listening this far into the podcast, or perhaps you listened to a couple episodes of Cider Chat, or perhaps you listened to all the episodes of Cider Chat and you're like, dang it, I'm going to finally go out, get some apple juice, and make some cider. I want to say go for it. There's plenty of time. You could really make cider year-round, and no matter what happens to that batch, it's still going to be a win-win. You're going to learn something about the fermentation process and what happens when you add yeast to fresh pressed apple juice, or you let it go wild. What happens there? Or let's say you let it go wild and then you add some yeast. Really, like, the sky is the limit. And I, of course, would like to encourage you to check out Fermentis, who is an international company that provides yeast cultures, lab-created yeast to cider makers. Not only cider makers, but to the brewing industry, the wine industry, folks who ferment. And they've definitely treated Cider Chat well. They're good supporters here. They gave us a whole bunch of gift packets to hand out at the Celebrating Women in Cider dinner that took place just a couple weeks ago as part of 2.0. And they keep on rolling out new cider yeast. Originally, they came out with one, and now they have 4 different select cider yeasts. So let me just go down that list briefly. You could go for AB1, which stands for Apple Balance. You could go for AC4. AC stands for Apple Crisp. You could go for AS2, which is Apple Sweet. And then there's my favorite, the TF6, which stands for Tutti Frutti. Now, don't get too hung up about the names Tutti Frutti if that sounds like too candy cane for you, because it isn't. I mean, the juice that you have will have its own magic, and then the yeast will kind of lend a certain direction. It's kind of like the plow going down the highway when there's a bunch of snow, creating a path for that juice there to ferment towards. So that's kind of how I look at it. And then some of your loving care will also, actually, I feel, lend quite a bit to what will be the finished product in the glass. That is the beauty of fermenting. And if you're going to choose a yeast to ferment with, why not choose Fermentis? By working with Fermentis, you are actually helping to support Cider Chat. So it's a win-win that way. They are the world's largest cultivator of yeast for fermenters. So why not go with the top dog who knows what they're doing and is really full in on the cider community? You want to find out more? Go to fermentis.com.
Walking through the orchards,
It's time now to go to our featured presentation with Matt Kaminsky, who's also known as Gnarly Pippin. Matt was first on this podcast back in Season 2 on episode 72, which is titled Lost Apples of the Quabbin, where he and a local friend, Al Sachs, were going out and hunting down the different apple trees that were long forgotten out in the Quabbin Reservoir where we live here. And this is an area where back around World War II, they took down 5 towns, believe it or not, 5 towns, 5 like vital happening towns, and created a watershed and reservoir area for Boston. And it still stands today. It's there providing water resources for Boston and is a huge wildlife area and corridor. And because it was this homestead site, there used to be distilleries there and apple orchards. This was a great place to begin the journey of finding the lost apples of the Quabbin. And we want to dial up a couple of years. So if that was season 2, so we're looking around 2016, 2017 when that came out. Nowadays, Matt is pretty full on his own project, and in the past couple of years, he started creating what is known as the Pomological Exhibition that was always taking place on the first weekend of November in our special spot of Ciderville, because Matt lives locally here in Western Massachusetts. So he does his exhibition up in Ashfield, up in the town center there, and folks send in apple samples from all the different wild pippins, and these are like wild seedlings, and they could be crab apples, these like forgotten trees, and folks get to taste it, look at these apples, and you'll hear a little bit more about what they're doing there. And as such, he's creating a archive of these different trees, and he gets samples from all over the map. It's not just this area here. It's like North America. And it brings a lot of people who are really excited to see, well, is there the next great apple to be found, and what to do with these apples, maybe to collect scionwood. So he's going to be telling you a bit about why he does this, and also why pomological societies and exhibitions are so important. And that's why I wanted to bring this episode with you today. He's very well spoken. He's doing a lot of stuff. You want to check out his website. This is a good season to do that. He has different things in his shop that you could get for your perfect little apple geek, or let those who love you, because if you're listening, you're obviously an apple geek, let them know, hey, I would like one of these cool little pruning saws from Matt Kaminsky, and give them a link, because he has both a small and a large pruning saw. It's a great gift. And he also has a book on the Wild Apple Forager's Guide, and he has these Pomological series exhibition manuals. They're books, full-out books, and I'm going to have a photo of the cover in the show notes here, and other things like grafting compounds. So do check out his website, Gnarly Pippins. He's doing the hard work. I could kind of relate to him because he's like working a full-time gig and also doing this other piece on the side, just really for the love of apples. So you got to love the guy for that. I know he prunes a lot of trees in the area here. So we're going to head to this recording. This was at the Cider Pop-UP. We had a number of different authors, including Matt, speaking at the 2.0 Cider Pop-UP, which was held in an old bank building in Greenfield. And this talk took place up in the president's office, which was really cool. It's up on the second floor, and it's on Main Street. So you might hear a little bit of background street traffic, but you are going to be able to hear the gist of what he's talking about. And at the very end, there was some Q&A, and the first person to ask a question was none other than John Bunker, who is an author in his own right, and he spoke during the 2.0 events on home orcharding for homeowners. So that's the first person. I'm not sure who the second person was asking who that was, but without further ado, let's just dive into it now with this wonderful talk about pomological exhibitions and societies with Matt Kaminsky. I want to welcome Matt to be here. He did the pomological exhibition yesterday in Ashfield. I hope you got a chance to see that. Just an amazing guy, as without everything he does around apples, but he's really helping to do so much for the community in teaching and really with foraging and getting folks excited about wild apples. And now he has this new book coming out. So take it away, Matt. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rhea. So thank you everyone for coming to see this. I see a couple familiar faces from yesterday, which is super great to see. That's really important to me because I think I spent most of the year preparing for the event that happened yesterday. So for those of you who don't know me or what I'm interested in doing, my name is Matt Kaminsky. I am a silvopasture-based farmer in Hadley, Mass, which is just south of here. So my farm that I work at, we're a little farming co-op that has a hard cider imprint based out of it. We have a sheep business that we offer grass-fed lamb and yarn, and we have a whole sort of silvopasture setup where we integrate our grazing animals into a cider orchard that is used to make hard cider that you can get on tap or by the glass, buy bottles of it this weekend, especially, just south of here. So anyway, I could talk a whole lot about that system on another day, but I want to just focus on what was going on yesterday, which is this was the third year we convened the Wild and Seedling Pomological Exhibition, which is a really exciting event. And I think a little bit of background on just that concept of like what a pomological exhibition is. It's not something that we hear of happening too often in the modern day, but in years past, definitely during sort of the golden age of apples in the United States, late 19th century, early 20th century, especially sort of the zenith of that like time period, but we have, abundance of pomological societies, which are organizations of farmers and horticulturalists, people interested in the study of fruit from a botanical perspective or an agronomy perspective, and just interested in the cultivation of fruit. Obviously, there's a lot of cultural reasons why fruit doesn't mean quite the same things to us now as it did back then, but these kinds of organizations are very commonplace. Massachusetts actually happened to be one of have two very, very old pomological societies based here in the States. So if you ever have flipped through old apple literature, old pomological literature, or even read just about historic apple varieties, you'll notice that a lot of apples have been introduced to the world, that originated in Massachusetts. And some of the avenues that existed for apples to be introduced, which is sort of a funny concept, happened at these annual meetings of pomological societies. We don't have a whole lot of pomological societies left anymore, which is, I think, a real problem. There are some, but these are generally organizations of the past. And an annual meeting would look a little bit like people gathering at a Grange Hall and sharing and displaying and tasting and analyzing different specimens of fruit which are sort of new to the community. Things that people have found while exploring for fruit, walking the edges of fields or in forests, and seeing a noteworthy chestnut variety, noteworthy walnut, even oaks and nuts are other things that were very popular to put on display. Apples, of course, is the subject that I focus on, and pears too, to a slightly lesser extent, but I know there's some pear heads in the room. So anyhow, apples having this amazing trait that I think most of you probably are aware of, their ability to produce genetically unique fruit from seed gives a unique opportunity to all of us, but especially in historical terms, in a historical context, fruit explorers and farmers and people interested in growing apples, gives a unique opportunity to diversify what's out there. And of course, within diversification is the idea of improvement and improving the things that we're growing. So that's one of the forces behind the reason why pomological societies have annual meetings, because we're always focused on what is a better variety of fruit. There's a lot of criteria that we look at in assessing why a fruit might be good or what can be improved about it, but things that aren't given a whole lot of thought today made a massive difference if you were interested in having long winter keeper apples, as an example, or things that were especially early ripening, or things that had unique traits that we don't totally see often now in our modern day, where apples are basically available from supermarkets 24/7, 365. And so industrialization and agriculture is one of the, in broad terms, the reason why pomological societies aren't really happening anymore. There aren't that many apple growers in left. There used to be many more people focused on the cultivation of a small farm, which included fruit trees. And so in the resurgence in popularity of cider in the 21st century, the last 30 or 40 years, there's a whole new interest in wild apples, wild fruit in general. So in 2016 was the first year that I think it clicked for me. But I have been interested in foraging wild apples for a long time, primarily for cider making, but also just in general to try and find apple varieties in uncultivated settings. So, looking for trees essentially that weren't planted by humans, that were just found in natural, unmanaged spaces like field edges and roadsides and stone walls and other interesting, weird, off the beaten path sorts of places. Because I think that there's something really special about the flavors that are found in these wild apples versus the cultivated varieties, including heirlooms that are, older historical varieties still being grown. But there's something very unique about wild apples that, appeal to me. There's, and not just me, I should point out. There's a very wide community at this point. But in 2016, I really went deep down the rabbit hole of finding, I guess I'd call this, to borrow a word from Claude Jolicoeur and the whole French orchard tradition, but a pommage, meaning a smattering or a collection of varieties of apples, which can make up an orchard. So I was interested in sort of establishing something like that of seedling apples that are from my area, adapted to the local conditions around where I live and where I grow apples. What ends up making very good cider, which varieties end up being exceptionally healthy. So this was a multi-year and continuing, probably lifelong obsession for me. And that was the genesis of the idea that there should be a Pomological Society. Again, we should have a group, or we should have a meeting, we should have a gathering of not just the apples that I find interesting, but the multitude of people who are engaged in this work. So come on in. I think you guys can all fit in. Want to keep it open. So anyway, with that mission in mind of just giving platform for myself and other people to show what they've been finding, what wild apples they've been foraging, what they've been able to, find and capture something special about, whether it's cider making, eating fruits, things that have certain unique characteristics, or even things that just somebody ends up liking for some reason. It doesn't even have to be sort of a shocking or amazing apple in a rubric or criteria sense. It's just a platform for these wild apples to be put on display, introduced to a wider community of people, and from there seeing where things go. So, in the idea of seeing where things go, in quotation marks, the things that would sort of come from a Pomological Society meeting, both in historical terms as well as the event that I'm facilitating, is what I hope is a great deal of networking among growers. Exchange of genetic material, apple material, so cuttings for grafting, which is the way that all apples are propagated if you'd like to reproduce a variety of fruit faithfully. So the exchange of scion wood is how these types of things spread from a single person being interested in a wild apple tree to a community of growers at a small scale geographically growing a certain variety, and then it can expand geographically once a variety is established as having certain merits and certain, is desired by people for making whatever they're making, whether it's cider or perry or applesauce or cider brandy. All these sorts of things have different apples that have different characteristics that are important to people. So trying to facilitate an expansion in diversity of apples that people are growing, especially in light of interesting cultural conditions that we have now, which I've mentioned before. Everyone knows that's why we're all here, is that cider is once again very popular. It's a drink that people enjoy. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of making ciders that speak about the places they come from. You know, there's a lot that I could say personally about why cider is expressive, and the apples that go into it are very important to illustrate that. There are also environmental conditions too that couple with those cultural conditions that I think it's very important that we express the current moment of what is happening within apples in general. I guess if anyone here has grown apples or is engaged with that work, I know a couple here are very, very deeply engaged in growing apples. Global warming and climate change is a really, really interesting topic among orchardists because there are a lot of things changing. And we're definitely past the point in our history where climate change will affect things. You know, speaking of this in a future term, but it's actually affecting things now. It has been for a long time and will continue to in an increasing way. And so having worked in orchards where common types of apples are being grown, and just seeing as time goes on, what is becoming more challenging for apple growers, what is causing economic harm to apple growers, from pests changing, pest dynamics, insects changing, which we have, possibly insufficient means to handle. So, there are new pests which are migrating northward. There are new diseases of apple trees which are migrating further north. So in the Northeast here, and even further north from us, there are new dynamics within growing apples that are causing serious harm in terms of what can be grown effectively, what can be grown economically well, but also just thinking about our ecology. As someone who tries to farm ecologically, chemical use is not really in my ideal set of circumstances for growing great cider apples. I think that if we can try and figure out ways to grow cider apples with no spray and no chemical intervention, we'd be in a really good shape for both our pocketbooks, because chemicals that are used in agriculture are very, very expensive for farmers to handle on the early part of the season before the crops are actually ready to market, before the cider is ready to purvey to the public. And additionally, we shouldn't be blasting antagonistic chemicals into our space. We shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, my talk is not supposed to be a rousing sermon on natural growing, although it's another talk for another day. But that's sort of another one of the conditions that I think gives this pomological exhibition some context, some background, because a lot of people who submitted their own wild fruit to this exhibition have similar opinions, have a similar outlook on what it means to be a responsible grower, and they have an idea about what it is to grow nice cider fruit. It doesn't involve heavy use of chemicals. So one of the other things that people are looking out for all year long, monitoring wild apple and pear trees in their area, is how healthy are these trees? How healthy are these wild apple trees which don't receive any attention from humans? So you get a huge spectrum of motivations for why people are interested, why there's this sort of potential energy built up in the community about, oh man, I have these amazing wild apples in my area. I think that this could really be important for our community of growers to incorporate into their orchards. And there are also people who don't have apple growing backgrounds. It's not just for big shot apple farmers. It's also for people who enjoy making cider at a small scale at home, who have interesting trees and interesting fruit that speaks to what their place is. So we have a wide range of context for why this pomological exhibition that I have been facilitating has struck a chord with people. And a little bit about what we saw yesterday. We had 150 apple and pear submissions. These are all wild seedling pears and apples. We had representation from all of the New England states, New York State, much of the eastern seaboard, and parts of the Great Lakes, as well as the Mountain West and the Southwest. We had some apples coming from all over the place. And this is the first year that we officially have an international exhibition. There was quite a bit of Canadian representation. which is really exciting. So clearly this has struck a chord because this has exceeded my wildest expectations about who would be interested in this, who would be interested in participating, and has only been increasing in these 3 years, which is so exciting to me. There are very few repeat entries, which is not something that I was really set on having. It would be fine with me if some of the same fruit was put on display every year, because not everyone can make it to this event. So I'd love to have some notable things appear a couple years in a row. We did not have a whole lot of that. There was just a little bit of repeat content, and it's a public tasting. This is an opportunity for anybody, open to the public, to come and taste 150 wild apples. So it's a absolute palate wrecker. It's a lot of strange flavors, a lot of really intense flavors, all in one place. So everyone who in this room who was actually there yesterday has experienced a wash of tannins that they've probably never experienced before. And in addition to having a tasting, it's important to me to document this thing. And that's the real reason why I'm giving this little presentation, is that with each year that I hold this exhibition, a print publication is composed that documents the different apples in specific terms. So in going back to the historical Pomological Society meetings, the proceedings of these meetings would be published. Oftentimes, botanical illustrators or watercolor painters, if in really highfalutin communities, but oftentimes just illustrations of apples that are put on display are accompany the formal pomological descriptions and sort of a write-up about each apple that's introduced. So that kind of literature I just have a super fascination with and a super love affair with. You can find e-books and digitized versions of these old books. You can go to certain historical society buildings that have libraries of old farm literature, and you can see some of these publications in person. But I wanted to recreate that because this is very much the same genre of event and organized meeting. So I wanted to recreate a print publication to document this as an enduring form of, just a minutes of this meeting and what was put on display. And of course, what people thought was super interesting and excellent. So the first time that I convened this meeting, which, by the way, I have hard copies of the proceedings from our first Pomological Exhibition. This happened in 2019. The book was put out in 2020. In this first exhibition, we did not include superlatives, which is sort of a voting system. You get to taste 150 wild apples, pick up pens periodically, and write down tasting notes on placards that are put in place on tables next to each variety. And at the end of this process, you get to cast a vote in 5 different categories that are sort of corresponding to the different characteristics that people are looking for. In this year's case, we had 5 categories. It was best quality eating, so best eating apple, best quality cider, so what you think would make the best possible cider from all 150 apples. We also had best pear, which is more broadly speaking, obviously self-explanatory, best crab apple, and then there's a visual sort of contest, best in show, which is sort of what's the showiest, prettiest apple, because of course when you get 150 wild apples together, you have 150 different shapes and sizes and looks. So there's a visual component to this as well. So including the sort of the winners or the top rated varieties, sort of first, second, third, and runner-ups in each of these categories every year seems like a really good way to drive interest among local growers in, wow, this is a really super duper apple. I think that this has a lot of potential. If it has something that says, oh, this won gold medal, 100 people went to this event and voted that this was the best one in the room, then that's going to carry a little bit of influence in what is being grown, what's being sought after. Whether that is a specific variety that's sought after, or whether it's a trait about that apple that is found to be more popular among people in a certain place at a certain time. So heirloom apples, while historical conservation is of sort of the utmost importance to prevent us from losing even more agrobiodiversity with apples than we already have, there are all of these sort of heirloom apples of the future, which are just being discovered and introduced now, which have equal promise and are of equal importance in terms of preserving and getting people excited about. And I think cider is a great vehicle to get people excited about that, especially folks who don't have a grower's background, who don't have a habit of growing an orchard. If there's a really wonderful, best quality cider medalist in the Pomological Exhibition, then that might find its way into some cider bottles that are being made locally or not locally. But it's another way that people can latch onto this and engage with this event. But this is the cover for the second volume, volume 2 of the Pomological series. The cover I'm really excited about because it's sort of like a micro close-up view of the skin of a certain wild apple. This is a variety called Amsterdam Green, which was submitted by a gentleman from Saratoga Springs, New York. And it has sort of a typical arrangement of small black dots and big sooty markings. This is a common, ubiquitous cosmetic disorder of fruit called sooty blotch and fly speck. It's totally harmless, but anyone who's interested in wild apples and knows about that knows that just about every wild apple you'll ever find, except for a very rare few, will be totally covered in this. So this is sort of like a nod toward the uncultivated, unmanaged fruit. No chemicals to make these blemish-free. We're embracing the wild fruit. So this is the cover. We've worked with a really, really wonderful book designer and publisher to get this redesigned. So again, we'll actually go through the whole series, including a back issue of Volume 1 at some point down the line to sort of go forward with this new design template, which I'm really excited about. So aesthetically, this is a beautiful book. William Mullen, who is on Instagram as at Palm Queen, who is a very, very, at this point, very well-known photographer, whose subjects include apples of the world. He's a very influential photographer, and he has done all of the photos and will continue to for this Pomological series. This is a shot of an apple from Hadley, Massachusetts, from my home farm. My friend Jonathan Carr, also my boss at Carr's Cider House, has a sort of 15-year-old breeding project going on. And this is one of the 93 entries in Volume 2, which is going to be coming out. The pre-order is now available. You can pre-order it downstairs. And this is just, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this apple and tell you kind of what sorts of information you're going to find in this book, in addition to a beautiful photograph of this variety and 92 others. This is Golden Wonder. This is a variety bred by Jonathan Carr in Hadley, Massachusetts. And it is an intentional cross of Golden Russet and Gold Rush. We're trying to capture a bright source of acid that would grow with relatively little disease. So Golden Russet and Gold Rush, both fairly disease-resistant apples, planted 100 seeds from this breeding experiment. And this is one of several which have shown really serious promise. But this might be the premier one at this point. So I'm doing a little promotion for the variety too. But this is Golden Wonder. This was the silver medalist in Best in Show, as well as the best quality eating from 2021's exhibition. And it's just a stunner. It's a beautiful apple. And it has some interesting characteristics. It's got many different colors on there and an extremely thick skin, which gives it sort of some hardiness to certain pests. It gives it a great shelf life. It's a long storage. It can be stored for a very long time without refrigeration. And it has some really nice visual, tactile elements to it. It has these lenticels, which are the little dots on the apple. They're a russet-colored lenticel rather than a white or a soft and non-textured one. There's a very textured lenticels that are raised above the surface of the skin. They're sort of star-shaped, which we call stellate. And it's just an overall stunning apple. So if anyone wants to just take a peek at this, is sort of a sample page from Volume 2. We're really proud of it. It's been a year in the making, and it's finally available for pre-order. The books are going to ship before the new year, so hopefully they actually arrive at people's houses in time for the holidays, because they do make really good gifts for people who are pomological nerds, apple lovers, anyone who just loves a good art book too. This appeals to, because it's got a lot of esoteric information in it, which is my component, but Bill is such an incredible artist that his work alone is worth looking at for hours. So we're selling these. We have 500. It's an edition of 500. It will not be reprinted once it sells out, because we have another book to be made every single year, and it's going to be an ongoing series that we work on. So that's what I wanted to gather and tell you about. So you got the context. Got a little info about the book itself, and if anyone has any questions,
So Volume 2 comes out and there's people in this room and other people that you know or don't know that then say, oh, I want to plant Golden Wonder or whatever. What next? How does that then happen? Is there going to be a system for obtaining trees or scion wood, or what do you envision, or what might you be putting into place?
So the question, if you read the book and you say, wow, I'd love to plant this particular variety, how do I go about doing that? So one of the pieces of information, critical pieces of information that's included with every one of these is just the source information of this apple tree. One of the rules for criteria of submission is that you give your name as the submitter and where the tree and where you are from. Oftentimes people choose to associate themselves with a farm, a cidery, or oftentimes people who just don't have that kind of affiliation will just say, well, it's John Smith from Leominster, Massachusetts, as an example. So the information about the submitter is given and attached in every single entry that's published. Additionally, I have started a project that is also going to be ongoing where I operate a small apple tree nursery at the farm I work at and at my home, where I'm growing the metal varieties, the ones that were ranked and rated first, second, and third, and in some cases runners-up of these most notable varieties that seem to carry some favor with the crowd. So I'm propagating these, and I have a nursery where I sell 1 and 2 year old grafted trees. So you can buy apple trees of this variety through me. My first sale of these varieties, ones that were put originally on display in volume 1, these are now available. Some select varieties. I will not say I could possibly manage to grow every single one because, of course, it's a real challenge to propagate wild apples if they're not producing cuttings of a certain quality that you can actually easily graft them. Another talk for another day, but I do everything in my power to actually propagate these and make it possible for other people to propagate them and keep this as an open source sort of thing where there isn't any plant patenting, there isn't any non-propagation agreements that are going down. These are all varieties that people should have the option to freely exchange, freely develop their own nursery stock if they choose to of these varieties. So I have half a dozen varieties that were sort of the medalists from 2019, as well as other notable seedlings that I myself have been following for a number of years and propagating that are for sale through my nursery. So you can reach out to me directly. This winter, I'll be making those nursery trees available online. You can order them online for pickup in the springtime. And if you do your own grafting, if you're someone who has that skill and that background, then you can find the name of the person who submitted a certain apple, and you can get the cuttings from that variety if you reach out to them and do your own coordination. Or if it's something that I personally offer, then I can also sell some sign wood, as well as Fedco Trees is a really great source that has integrated a lot of noteworthy seedlings into their catalog. And there's a few actually in volume 1 that are being offered commercially. So those are 2 sources you can go, but also I want to make it available for people to do their own networking to get those varieties into the right hands. So I think we have 2 minutes left. Time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If anyone has a question, shout it out.
You stick to standard rootstock for those seedlings that you're propagating?
I try to stick to a larger format rootstock, and that's personal preference, but I think that a large format rootstock is a good idea because they generally will yield a hardy and long-lived tree. And longevity is something that I think we're all hoping for. If you're involved in orchard preservation, you hate to see a tree that has a lifespan of 30 years that doesn't have that built-in longevity, because we all rely on old trees to do a lot of our cider making and foraging. So I like to keep with that tradition. So I use a rootstock called Budagovsky 118. That's the rootstock that I'll be using in this year and next year. I might integrate some semi-dwarfs in the next couple of years. So yeah. Any other questions? In the back, Nick?
Yeah, Matt, when are you going to release the superlatives for yesterday?
Right, so the question was, when are we going to release the superlatives? Who won? Who won each variety yesterday at the 3rd exhibition? So tonight, actually, I have decided I'm going to, as I'm winding down this evening, I'm going to publish that online. So if you follow me on social media at Gnarly Pippins, you can find out which apples and which pears took the gold, silver, bronze, and runner-up from yesterday. As far as the superlatives from 2021's exhibition, the second exhibition, that is all published in the volume 2. So if you smash that pre-order button on your computer or go downstairs and scan the QR code, you can get the pre-order, and then when that arrives at your doorstep, you can see sort of what happened last year, what was the most notable. We did have a reappearance of some of the medalists yesterday. So that's a hint, but I'm not going to tell you exactly who it is until tonight. So anyhow, all right, I think that's probably all the time we have, but thank you everyone. Thank you.
This recording took place once again at the Cider Pop-UP at the Pushkin on November 5th as part of the CiderDays 2.0 events. If you'd like to keep on following along Matt's journey and to find out how to get this book, what other tools that he has out there in his little tool chest of orchard care, well, do follow him online at Gnarly Pippin. And with that, I'm going to leave you here. This is Rhea Windcaller and the Talking Palms. Hello! Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like palms. We love orchards and having fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like palms. We like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes, we do. We like palms. Oh yes, we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like palms. Oh yes, we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!